Thank you. Nice to meet you after this long time.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's start with my session. You can scan this barcode, and this is pretty nice. It's the live presentation of PowerPoint, and so it helps me to see how many attendees are following my session, and there is also the ability to post emoji during the presentation by you, and you can even go back on go forward across the slide if you want to see the slides that I'm presenting. And there is also the transcript. It's very useful. You can read the subtitle with the language which is more comfortable for you. And in the end, there is also feedback that you can send me, and you can even evaluate the session. Yeah, that's right. It's very nice. It helps me to improve always the quality of my presentation. There is also a YouTube video on my YouTube channel how you can handle this kind of presentation. I recommend you to give a check. But I think so. I will start. So if other people want to join, please do it now because I will skip the slide. Okay, let's go forward. Okay, we are going to talk about how you can build real-time processes in Microsoft 365. But first of all, before to start, I want to express my big thanks to the sponsors to make this event possible. Without the sponsors and organizers, it's impossible to stay in front of you, and even if virtually, and to present my session. Okay, a few words about myself. So Jenkins has presented me already very well. I am Giuliano De Luca. I am a technical architect, blogger, speaker. I started in May to be proactive in my YouTube channel, and I have been awarded as Microsoft MVP in the Office Development category for the third time in a row. You can find here my Twitter handle if you have questions or feedback. If you want to stay in touch with me, please do it. And there's also my blog here, and as I said, my YouTube channel. I recommend you to check and subscribe to stay tuned with my next videos. I post 2 videos per week, and you can find a lot of how-to videos in the context of Microsoft 365 and Azure. There is also here my GitHub account with 55 repositories around web application and SharePoint Framework. I hope you can find something useful that you can reuse for your project and your work. I was born in Rome. I am an Italian guy, but I moved in Germany since 5 years now. I'm living there. And here there is the URL of a nice bot that I developed. It's called MyLeoBot. It helps you to automate tasks in Microsoft 365. You can even change your profile picture. You can ask who is your manager, or you can send an email. You can create a task in Planner just with some command. It's totally free, and it's available in the Microsoft Teams store. Okay, let's start now with the agenda. I will touch very fast SharePoint Framework because I think now it's out from several years. I think we already have an overview what is SharePoint Framework. That's the reason why I will touch this topic fastly. Then I will introduce you the webhooks, what is a webhook. Then we will touch the get changes API of SharePoint, because I'll show you a solution, a real solution in the real life, and how you can consume this API in order to grab fresh data to display to the users. And finally, conclusion. Okay, let's start with SharePoint Framework. So SharePoint Framework, we will see in the next slide, but before I'll show you this solution architecture that I'm going to show you. So basically, what I will do, I will subscribe a webhook, a SharePoint webhook for a SharePoint list, and then every time that I will add a new item in this list, there is a Node.js web app that will get a notification by SharePoint. This is called a webhook. And basically with this notification, we can send this webhook across the Node.js web app as a broadcast. So we can broadcast this notification to SharePoint Framework solution. I have two SharePoint Framework solutions. The first one is a web part, and the second one is an application customizer that displays those notifications. So then this means that when I navigate the SharePoint site and when I am in the modern UI, I will see this task notification appear. And then if I am on the web part, I will see also the web part with a new button on top, and this will tell to the user that there is some content new to display. So then, so I use it for Node.js in order to establish the communication between Node.js and SharePoint Framework. I used a very powerful JavaScript library called Socket.io, which is used even by Microsoft. And then if you are more familiar maybe with C#, you can use Signal R. So instead of having a Node.js web app, you can build a .NET Core application, and you can build your backend with C# instead of JavaScript or TypeScript. Moving forward with the next slide. So SharePoint Framework, it's as I said, it's out from several years now. I think are 3 years, if I'm not wrong. And it's a totally new client-side development model that allows you to extend SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. It's backward compatible. I don't know when the classic UI will be completely moved to the modern UI. I don't really know, but it's good to know that SharePoint Framework is backward compatible with the classic UI. So if you have, for some reason, a classic UI page, the web part or other kind of SharePoint Framework solutions will work finally and fine. There are a lot of open source tools with SharePoint Framework. You can consume the Microsoft Graph API easily. That means that you can collect info around Microsoft 365, and then you can even connect to the SharePoint Framework solution to line of business systems and cloud services. Okay, let's walk through now about every kind of SharePoint Framework solution that is possible to build. The first one is the classic web parts that you can add in a SharePoint page, and you can use it even in Microsoft Teams. Then there is the application customizer that basically injects HTML or JavaScript file. In this case, we have an header and we have a footer, but you can even inject JavaScript. So for example, on my GitHub account, you can find a solution that helps you to integrate Google Analytics on SharePoint Online. So you can take advantage by using Google Analytics to keep track and monitoring the usage of your SharePoint site. So then there is the command set. So on top of our SharePoint list or document library, there is this command bar. You can extend this command bar by adding an additional button, for example. And when you select an item, clicking on this button, you can open a pop-up or you can open a panel with your solution. And then you can build your business logic and your user interface to do what the business requirements require to you. Then we have the field customizer. This means that you can build and you can customize the UI of a column in a SharePoint list. In this case, we have a percentage column. But now this kind of SPFx solution is competing with the list view and column formatting. So basically with a JSON file, you are able to customize the UI of a column or a view of a SharePoint list. And this is pretty cool. You can do crazy thing, as you can see from this GIF image. You can find a lot of sample in GitHub, in the official SharePoint GitHub account. There is the list column view formatting. You can search, you will find, because it's one of the first results that will appear in your search. And yeah, you can realize an amazing thing just with a JSON snippet. Okay, let's go now with the Microsoft Teams tab. So a SharePoint Framework web part become a tab in a team. So this is pretty cool because you can write one time your code, and this works in two different platforms, in SharePoint and Teams, which saves time and it's even easy to maintain. Then you can, this is my favorite feature regarding SPFx and Microsoft Teams, you can build personal app. This means that you can bring to all employees of a company your app, and across the policy in the Teams Admin Center, you can decide even if this app should be available only for few people, groups, or department. Let's say that you build a personal app for the HR department. With the policy in the Teams Admin Center, you can say that this app is available and installable only by people that are part of the HR department. Just to make an example, but of course you can make available a personal app to all employees of a company, which is very powerful. Then there is the SPFx library component, and it makes sense to use this kind of solution, SPFx solution, when you have more than one SPFx solution in a page. Let's say that you have 2 web parts or 3 web parts, and you have to use the same library. The problem is that when you use, for example, Moment.js in all of your web parts in the page, let's say in 3 web parts, and if you reference this library in every SPFx solution, you will load this library in the page 3 times, and this is not good for the performance and for the page loading. Then when you have this kind of use case, you can create a library component, and you can insert in this library component the library that you will use in your SPFx solution. In this case, Moment.js, but you can even build your, let's say, custom method that you will use in your organization, and you have to consume maybe this method every time that you run an SPFx solution. So it makes sense to use also in this case a library component. This means that if you use a library component to create, let's say, a package with all libraries contained, you will use a link reference to add in your SPFx web part. And this means that when you open a SharePoint page where you have 3 web parts, for example, you will load the Moment.js, for example, only one time, even if this library is used in all 3 web parts. Last thing that you can do with SPFx, in particular with Teams, is building a messaging extension. So you can extend the message bar by bringing your UI and by bringing your logic, your business logic. Like in this case, you can select some card and you can attach this card to the message. And so here we go. In this case, this send a message, a predefined message to a bot, and then the bot will reply to the user. Okay, as I said in the first slides, I will show you a solution based on Node.js. So then let's make sure that it's clear for everybody what is Node.js. It's server-side JavaScript and makes use of Google Vue 8 JavaScript engine. It is the same engine that Google Chromium use, so now also Edge, and supports the latest ECMAScript features. It's open source, cross-platform, can act as a web server, but more is possible. And you can check the version of your node installed on your machine by typing in a command line tool node-v. Okay, I'll demo now the Node.js app. I'll show you this web app, this Node.js web app. That's it. So this is my Node.js web application. What I have here is a normal Node.js web application. I used here some library, some additional library. In this case, I'm using Express as framework in order to have the ability to use the get and the post method. Then this is very important. I use Socket.io, which is a very powerful JavaScript library, and this basically helps you to create a real-time application. If you think about a chat, for example, where you have a server and you have a client, it works in the same way. So this Node.js web app will act as a server and will send a webhook every time that SharePoint sends to this application a webhook. We'll send in broadcast this notification to every client that is connected to this Node.js application. This means that when we will open the SharePoint page with our SharePoint Framework solution, the SharePoint Framework solution will start the connection to this Node.js web app. So what we have here, we have a get method, and this basically display an HTML page. I'll show you here what I have. It's basically this page, and this solution is deployed on Azure. It's a normal web app, Azure web app, and so here, this is the HTML page that we see. It's a very simple HTML page that show me the last webhooks received from SharePoint. And then we have in the post method, very important, we have an if condition, because when something is added in the query as a query parameter, in this case, the validation token, because when you subscribe a webhook to SharePoint, the first time SharePoint sends you a validation token, and you have to send back to SharePoint or Microsoft Graph API, we will see later, you have to send back this token in plain text. Once you have done that, the webhook is up and running, and you have correctly subscribed to the webhook. From this time, you will start to get notification, in this case from SharePoint. So then for the future notification, we will go through always in the else condition, and we will get this webhook. So what I have here, it's very important. I have this object IO, which is the Socket.io library, and this is in particular is the Socket.io server, because as I said, this application is acting as a server. This server will emit a notification to every SPFx solution which is connected to this app. And then we'll send exactly the webhook that SharePoint sent to this application. In this way, the SPFx solution can do something, because even the front end, the SPFx solution, will get this webhook, and we can display refreshed data, or we can start to run our business logic. Then I write, as I say, this webhook that I get in a TXT file, and I display this TXT file in the HTML page that we have seen. That's it. This is my Node.js app. You can use .NET Core app with C#, and instead of having a Socket.io, you can use the other popular library provided by C#. Okay, let's go back now to the slide. It's time to introduce you now the webhooks. What is a webhook, or better, what are webhooks? It's a way to be notified of a done change. It's based on a push model instead of a pull model. So in the past, everybody was used to work with pull model. So we have, for example, or we had worked with schedule a task that run every minutes, every hours, every day, I don't know. And this kind of task run, check if there's something new to grab, and then start to the business logic to work with the process that we have. So now this kind of model, it's totally new, and it's powerful, because instead of running something every X minute, you can have your application there ready to catch notification. And when something is really changed in our case in Microsoft 365, because we are in this context, but this invests many other technologies, so many other web application, or many other web app platform. It's not only about Microsoft 365 or Office 365. And this basically, when something changed, send to you this notification, and this is very powerful. It's a universal model used by many services like WordPress, GitHub, MailChimp, and the first version was available for OneDrive and Outlook from several, I guess 2 years, or 2 years. It's available in SharePoint Online and Microsoft Graph API. Even in Microsoft Graph API, it's very powerful, because, for example, you can get notified when a new Office 365 group is created. So imagine that in your company, you have to monitor when a user has requested, or when a user has created a new team in Microsoft Teams, because probably you have to run your process that add the tabs in this team, or maybe does post-provisioning stuff. In this case, a way to go is to establish a webhook with a Graph API, and in this way you get notified every time that a new Office 365 group is created. Okay, let's move forward. Now I'll show you how you can subscribe a webhook and what happens. So first thing to do is send a post request to the API of SharePoint or to the Microsoft Graph API. This is depending where you want to create this webhook. And you have to target the list where you want to get notified when something is changed. In this case, as you can see here from this relative URL, we are subscribing a webhook for a specific list, and you have to send this JSON in the body. You have to specify the URL of this list with the GUID of this list. Then very important, you have to provide the notification URL. What is the application that get the notification from SharePoint in this case? And then you have to define the expiration date, keeping in mind that maximum you have 6 months of expiration period. And after this period, the subscription will end. This means that you have to review manually every time that the expiration date is coming, or maybe you can build a task that check all your subscription in your Office 365 environment, and when a subscription is coming to an end, you can renew the subscription for other 6 months. Going forward, okay, we have now in this sample what happens when you send the first post in order to start a subscription. So SharePoint send back to you a validation token, and you have 5 seconds to send back in plain text this token to SharePoint. Otherwise, this webhook will not start. This subscription will not start. After that, when you send back to SharePoint the validation token in plain text, you will get this from SharePoint again, from the SharePoint service. You will get this JSON with the ID of this subscription. Then you will have the expiration daytime. Please, if you can mute yourself. And then we have the notification URL, which is the URL of the web app that will get notified. And then the resource ID, that is basically the in this case the SharePoint list GUID. Okay, this is what happens when you start to get webhook from SharePoint. So you get this this JSON in the body, you get the subscription ID. The client state is very important. When you subscribe the first time a webhook, you have to provide the client state, and this will be a word that you will decide just to add more security, because then SharePoint will use this word. Could be an ID, could be a word that you want. Will send for every webhook, SharePoint will send you back this client state. So let's say that you write here an ID, and when you get this notification, you know that this is the webhook that you subscribed, and this is exactly the ID that, or the word that SharePoint will send you back, just to add more security. Finally, there is the expiration date, the resource, the tenant ID, the site URL, and then you have the web ID. These parameters are really important in order to query a SharePoint list, for example, and to grab fresh data, because you know that some user has added new content in this SharePoint list. So then you have all parameters that you need to query the SharePoint list. Okay, so this is the event notification. Even when you get a webhook from SharePoint, you have 5 seconds to send back 200 response with OK. Otherwise, SharePoint will end the subscription. So now we have here a bullet list of the supported events in SharePoint, in which case you can get a webhook from SharePoint. So you can have, like in our case, in the solution that I showed and I will show next, I will use the event add. So I want to get a webhook every time that someone had a new list item in the list. But you can even get webhooks when someone delete an item in the list, when update an item, when attach something or delete an attachment, check in or check out, uncheck out, move the file to any other place, convert the file or delete the version of this file or this list item. So as I said, you can subscribe webhooks also for Microsoft Graph API. There are several objects supported. You can subscribe a webhook for Outlook message. So when you get a new email, for example, you can get a webhook. Or when you have some event in your calendar. So let's say that there is a new event planned in your calendar. This will trigger a webhook. Even for Outlook personal contacts, for user group, as I said, if you change something in the Active Directory, for example, if you update an Office 365 group or if you delete an Office 365 group, this trigger a webhook and you can start to run your process. Even for Office 365 group conversation in the context of files, if you have something in OneDrive, if you delete or move files, you can even get webhooks for that. And then for chat messages and security alert. Let's say now that we have several advantages by using a webhook. And the first one is that it works with a retry mechanism with an incremental backoff strategy 5 times with 5 minutes interval. So for some reason, if you don't send back a response to SharePoint when you get a webhook, there is a retry mechanism. So maybe your server is down for some seconds or for some minutes. SharePoint try to contact your server, your web app that you built in 5 times with 5 minute interval. If this doesn't work, the webhook ends, the webhook subscription ends. Webhooks are secure as no event information is passed along during the notification. As we have seen in the JSON body, no information are sent. You get only in which place the change is happened. So in our case, you get only the ID of the list and the ID of the site where someone has changed something. We don't send, the webhook doesn't send in the JSON information related to the item, to the user. Then this is pretty secure. And then webhooks are easier to consume by SharePoint developers, for example, and are no VCF-based endpoints, are regular HTTP services. So our web API, it's absolutely enough to use the webhook. Recently, Microsoft has added an additional and powerful way to consume webhook. And this is even more secure because you can use an Azure Event Hubs to subscribe to a webhook. And this means that solutions are not able to expose a publicly available URL for security reasons or because they are deployed on premises. Let's say that you have a web API in your on-premise environment. All you need to do is use an Azure Event Hubs. In this way, you are able to collect webhooks coming from SharePoint Online. So if you cannot expose the URL of your web API publicly, then we have the benefit, and there are several benefits. The first one is removing the need for a publicly exposed notification URL, allowing high throughput of change notification. And this is pretty cool, temporizing the change notification in case your service needs to go offline for maintenance, for example. Okay, now let's check how we can renew a webhook. So in the case of SharePoint, you have 6 months as a maximum expiration date. Then you can renew this webhook by calling a REST API method, and you have basically to send a patch method to this URL on SharePoint. You have to send the list ID and then the subscription ID. Once you have done that, the subscription is renewed for additional 6 months if you specify that in the body. 2 patterns are possible to renew the subscription. You have a background job that regularly renew the needed subscription, and this is the recommended model. Or you can renew at notification time, so this will drop the webhook, and if there's no event within the defined expiration window. Okay, let's discuss now a little bit of the Get Changes API, and then I'll show you the full demo of this solution, and I will walk you through in the code. Okay, this is a cool API which is available in SharePoint. So basically, the idea here is when we get a webhook from a SharePoint Framework solution perspective, we consume this SharePoint API to get only items that are really new, because I want to get fresh content for the user. I don't want to grab old data. So when, for example, imagine that you have a site that handle a crisis or emergency, and to stay in the context of COVID. So imagine that you have a SharePoint site where you use the site to communicate to the employees of your company about the measures of your company and the challenge of COVID. Imagine that you want to notify to the user immediately when you post a news on the SharePoint page. So you can get a webhook for that, and your SharePoint Framework solution will get this webhook. Then, by consuming the Get Changes API, is able to get only the new communication, the new SharePoint page that has been created in this site. In this case, and in this way, you are able to display only fresh content for the user. So let's say now the token that you have to use in order to consume this Get Changes API, I'll show you later. So you have to build this change token. The first part of the change token is the number and identify the version number. Then you have the change scope. If you use SharePoint list or document library, you have to use 3 as a change scope. Then you have to provide the GUID of the list as a third parameter of this change token. And finally, this is very important, you have to tell to SharePoint when was the last time that you query this API. This is very important because SharePoint will send back to you just the new content considering the last query date. And this should be in the ticks format. I'll show you later. And then the last one is you can leave as is -1. This is the change item value of the change token. And finally, in the body, you have to specify what kind of information you want to grab. I added here, for example, add true and item true because I want to collect list item only when these items are added in the list, not updated, not deleted, but only when they are added. And then you have to include the token that we have seen now together in the change token start. Okay, enough talk. Let's jump on the solution. So first of all, I'll show you the demo environment. I'll show you this SharePoint site. I have here this web part. So this is an an SPFx web part that helps me to create and to subscribe a webhook. And but you can use Postman or Insomnia, any other HTTP request client. But this is pretty useful, so I can update the subscription by clicking on this button, and this SharePoint Framework solution will renew the subscription for me easily. Then in the client state, I added these words, and this is what SharePoint will send back to me. We have the expiration date, when this webhook is going to expire, and then we have the list ID where I subscribed this webhook, and this is the URL of my Node.js web application that will get webhooks, and it is exactly this web application. Okay, so here is the sample how you can subscribe to a webhook easily. And now let's jump on the web part. So I have here this SharePoint Framework web part, and this collects all data from a list. I have this events list that I think already opened here. Here we go. Yes, is this one. So now what I will do is I will add a new item in this list, and we will see that this web part will load a button on top by telling me that there is a new content added in the list. And then I will get even a task notification in this area with a link. Okay, let's go now with this test. I will create now a new item, and I will type in M365 SPS Bangalore, then some description here, the thumbnail. So here I have to add a link because this link will appear in the task notification. I will add my YouTube channel link. There we go. Then alternate text. YouTube. There we go. I'm ready now to create this item in the list. And now this item is added. There we go. If I switch now on this solution, on this SharePoint Framework web part, we will see in some seconds that the web part will refresh with a new button on top, and then we will see a task notification that will appear in this area. So as I say, this will take just some seconds, and there we go. We have this task notification, which will disappear after 10 seconds. So I can open this link, for example, if this is an important news for me. And so this is, and here you can see my YouTube channel, the link that I added in the list item. And finally, I have even this button in the web part, and this tells me that I have this new item in the list. If I add a second item, I will have this number that will change with 2 new items. So if I click now on this item, the web part refresh and loads this new content just added in the list. So this is a very simple solution, but it is very, very powerful, because imagine to use this mechanism to build your own SharePoint Framework solution. So you can stay in touch and notified every time that you change something in Microsoft 365. In this case, we have seen a SharePoint list, but this, as I said, could be an Office 365 group, or could be any other object available in Microsoft Graph API. Even if you add something in your calendar, you can trigger your process, and you can display stuff to your user by using a SharePoint framework. This could be even a a totally new custom web application, which is outside of the context of Office 365 or Microsoft 365. So maybe you want to have a new web app, a new custom web app hosted on Azure. You can integrate this app with Microsoft 365 by getting webhooks, for example. Okay, let's walk through now a little bit to the code. So I don't know how many time I still have, maybe 5 minutes.
We have 2 minutes only.
Okay, great. So I will go very faster. I'll show you just the SharePoint Framework solution that I have. This is the task notification. I just want to show you the focal point of this, which is the connect to socket.io. So every time that I run this SharePoint Framework solution, it's this method it's invoked. And so here we have the important part. So basically we have the URL of the Node.js web app in order to create this socket.io object. And then we have this event.on, and this trigger every time that that the Node.js app sent to me and broadcast to me the webhook. I am able to get the data here, and then I can execute my query, my get last changes by consuming the SharePoint API. So don't worry, you can find this solution on my GitHub account, and there is a README which explain very well how you can integrate and how you can install this solution on your environment. So I think that's it. The same thing it is for the web part. We have the same mechanism, but that's it. Let's wrap up now the session. Let me go back on the slide. Let me resume. So here you can find several resources around the SharePoint Framework, Graph Explorer, Graph API, Fluent UI. So if you want to make a screenshot or whatever you want, you can do it. And again, here my YouTube channel, where you can find a lot of how-to videos, and it's helpful for end user, IT pro, and developers. So please give it a try and subscribe if you like. So thank you for having me. Thank you, the organizer, and again, thank you to the attendees.